minutes, 390 to the post office, 18 from Wolf. Also on 55 heading northbound, heavy between River and Blodgett with ongoing construction. And the Stevenson inbound slows between Cicero and Pulaski. Gets heavy again between Ashland and the Dan Ryan with the construction on the Dan Ryan. Dan Ryan inbound takes about 22 minutes, 95th to downtown. Hits the brakes between the Stevenson and Roosevelt because of the construction that's taking out the right lane. Bishop Ford inbound slows between 111th and the Dan Ryan, and the Tri-State northbound sluggish between the Reagan and the Eisenhower. That's traffic. I'm Paul Bowden-Laws on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast with our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Breezy today. It'll be mostly sunny. The high today, 61. Clear tonight, low 48. Partly sunny. Terrific day tomorrow. The high 70. And then sunny, breezy, a nice day on Wednesday. The high at 73. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
39 at O'Hare, 46 Lakefront, 28 in Aurora. Your next news update is at 7:30. And Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy updating and correcting a previous story. Buddy Holly did not die in Storm Lake, Iowa. That's in Buena Vista County. He died in
Clear Lake,
Iowa, in Cerro Gordo County.
Sorry.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Name assassinator now, town name assassinator.
Well, I mean, the day if people are going to pilgrimage to the site of the day of the crash, the day the music died, and want to memorialize Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Richie Valens, I don't want them to wind up in Storm Lake when they need to be in Clear Lake. So I just don't want, family vacation.
Right.
I know these
You
are
don't want it
precious
to be
moments. I don't want them in the wrong town in Iowa. All right. Switching gears to talk a little bit about matters geopolitical, we're going to be joined by our friend Jim Carafano. But I got to get this. I got to subscribe to this guy's newsletter. I've read excerpts from his newsletter before. This guy named Joel Ross from Citadel Realty Advisors, and he's got a good handle. I mean, he's looking at things through an economic prism, but he's got a good handle on geopolitics, right, as well. I've mentioned him before in context of energy policy on some of the data that he's provided on what's happening with, for example, the construction of coal plants the world over, as well as in the West, where people talk about this being a global issue and, for example, China not exactly being on board with the grand climate change plans of the apocalyptic left in this country. And so speaking of China, Joel Ross went through Biden's economic plan, that was in part put together by Moody's. So when Joe Biden said Moody's Analytics has reviewed it and sanctions his plan, well, Moody's helped put it together because they're leftists over at Moody's. FYI. He went through the full Moody's report and analysis. On China, here's what you'll hear from Biden, writes Joel Ross. He'll rejoin the WTO, World Trade Organization, and deal with China through more of the same dialogue through WTO that was used before Trump. That failed for many years. There's no reason to think it will succeed now. He will also join the TPP and also talk to China through the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, thinking now they will change their policies, even though he failed to get anything accomplished when he was VP and in Beijing. No more confronting China directly. Biden assumes China will change its ways through conversation by these organizations' diplomatic discussions with them. That was a totally failed strategy until Trump changed the game. The argument is that Trump accomplished little with a Phase 1 deal, and so he failed. They ignored that the virus got in the way. They also ignored that Trump is now confronting China in the South China Sea and shutting down spy operations on campuses and in corporations, the Confucius Institute stuff that we've discussed, and cutting off access to U.S. tech. Don't forget that while Biden was in Beijing holding talks, China gave Hunter Hunter Biden $1.5 billion for his make-believe private equity fund. Plus, he received millions more from others in China for unexplained reasons. One more topic, that being immigration. He will, quote-unquote, normalize immigration. This is, again, Biden's plans, and there's a geopolitical and national security component to both of these. Specifically stated in the plan, grant citizenship immediately to DACA people, and reopen the border to allow in migrants and asylum seekers from Latin America or anywhere. Back to before the wall policy. Assumption is the economy needs immigrants to grow fully, so let them all in. Ignore that these are unskilled people and kids, MS-13 criminals. They go on welfare, which will be made available to them easily and immediately. Adds little to the U.S. economy other than more mouths to feed. Pass, quote-unquote, sweeping new immigration laws. Translation, open borders, shut down ICE, letting in hundreds of thousands to add low-wage competition to U.S. citizens. That is the analysis of Joel Ross, Citadel Realty Advisors. But as I said, it implicates national security issues, and that's where Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano comes in, who joins us now. Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jim, are you there?
Oh, Buddy Holly's dead?
Yeah, we didn't know how to break it to you. Yeah, we thought we'd ease into it with a discussion of China.
No. Oh, man.
Richie Valens and the Big Bopper, too.
Yes,
Just
don't
rip the
forget those
Band-Aid
other
off.
ones. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So what about what Joel Ross has to say about Biden's plan on China, his characterization of it? But if we go back to how previous administrations were dealing with China through these international organizations as described, is that really a step back to essentially a red cape to the Chinese communists?
Yeah, well, look, let's start with the international organizations where that assessment completely misses the boat.
Okay.
Maybe in the 1990s, international organizations where we all got together to kind of create norms and everything else, but this is not the 1990s. China has a strategy for organizations which is primarily designed to ensure that Chinese interests are advanced and protected. So the notion of going to these organizations, and that is a neutral platform, that's ridiculous. That China's goal is not to see these organizations be a neutral platform. They're designed to China wants to see them used to protect China's interests. So I think essentially what you're doing would be essentially enabling Chinese foreign policy. That makes no sense to me.
Well, that's Joel Ross's analysis. You're saying the Biden plan makes no sense, and the WHO is a good example of what you're talking about.
Well, what I'm saying is trying to use international organizations as a neutral ground to try to influence the behavior of China is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. This would be like having the bank robber come in and help you count the money in the bank.
Mm-hmm. And what about a return to this discussion that has been shelved for a while because of all the other pressing issues, but border security? I mean, that persists as an issue because there are very different visions on what border security means, and there is a real fervor within Democrat Party ranks to do things like shut down ICE and move towards open borders policies.
Yeah, I would just say, look, at a time of global health concerns like a pandemic, 8-9% unemployment, and a really serious war on drugs, and a time when the last thing Mexico wants is open borders, because many of these migrants are coming from Central America and they're coming into Mexico, and they're a problem for Mexico as well. So this would not only be devastatingly bad for the United States, it would actually be bad for Canada and Mexico as well. So it's not a policy that it's something that may have sounded good like 8 years ago when we didn't see all these problems clearly manifest themselves right in front of us, but today it would make no sense.
I want to get back to China in regards to the COVID virus. I mean, we still don't know if it was released purposely, if it was a mistake, if it was an accident, if it came for a bat. But do you think that some people are happy in China that President Trump has caught the COVID or the China virus, as he calls it?
Yeah, I have no idea because, and I don't know what you do with public opinion in China because I don't know how much of the stuff that gets out externally we could actually accept as reflective of the Chinese people. But here's what I would say is, look, engaging with this regime kind of on it. Let's just forget what happened the last 4 years would be an incredible mistake, and the results would be cascading. Essentially, you just wouldn't be handing over policy to the Chinese for a couple of years to figure out was it working, and then you went back to doing what Trump did. The allies in the region who have come to us and partner with us because they think we'd be tough on China, they would be sitting there blinking, going, "What are you guys doing?" And the Europeans who are really kind of tortured over this and trying to decide where should we come down? Should we kick Huawei out? Should we not let Huawei in? If they see the United States essentially saying, "Oh, okay, everything's fine with China," essentially that is doing the Chinese bidding.
Give us your general assessment here, 30 days out from an election, of how principled realism, sort of the principled realism, the philosophy of the Trump administration in terms of foreign policy, what it has done to our relationships with our allies, what it has done to our relationships in terms of trying to quell or box in our enemies. What's the grade that you give it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty easy. I mean, first of all, I love to talk about the allies one because one of the criticisms is how this administration doesn't respect allies.
Right.
And the reality is that you just run the table. Asia Pacific, all the key allies, the people we need to push back on China, India, Australia, Japan, stronger. The Middle East, I mean, that speaks for itself. I mean, the United States has realigned Arab nations and better aligned with our interests, much more stable region, better. He's actually more engaged in Africa than the last administration was. He is absolutely more engaged in Latin America, better relationship with Mexico, Central America, Brazil, all the key countries. So it's difficult to walk around the world and find a place where alliances aren't really strong. Even Europe, which is often brought up as the Europeans hate us, is Nordic countries stronger, Baltic countries stronger, Central Europeans stronger, Southern Europeans stronger. The only place where the United States has issues, and Great Britain, of course, is alliance is stronger than ever, is kind of old Europe. Okay, Germany, France, and all the little tiny countries stuck in between. And to be honest, many of their issues are really not with Trump. They're issues that they have even within themselves, and Trump's just an excuse for them. So from the alliance standpoint, obviously things are better. I think from the adversarial standpoint, look, North Korea's never been quieter. Russia is largely checkmated. Iran's in terrible, horrible shape, and China's been challenged like it's never been challenged in the last 3 decades. So I don't know how you look at foreign policy, and again, it's not a political comment because I'm a political guy. But if you're asking me, how do you look at foreign policy and say we're not better off than we were 4 years ago? I mean, you have to admit that. It's because it's just factually true.
I wanted you to listen to a compilation of highlights from Jim Comey's testimony before the Senate committee on Wednesday and get your reaction to what he had to say, or more to the point, didn't have to say.
Did Mr. Page deny knowing people that you accuse him of having contact with?
I don't remember. That's about all I recall. I don't remember. I don't remember learning anything additional about Steele's sources. Not that I recall, no. I don't remember Bruce or ever briefing me. I don't recall that.
So do you recall?
I do not.
Do you recall?
I do not. I don't remember any discussion. I don't remember using that word, but I don't remember using that word. I don't remember ever being informed. I don't recall being informed of that.
Did you ask any questions or do any due diligence on this at all?
I don't remember anything about the facts that have been revealed recently about the subsource. I don't remember the exact words, but something similar.
That doesn't
ring bells with me.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty stunning thing. It didn't ring a bell.
Which I'm sure you remember.
I don't remember the exact words. I don't remember whether I knew the Democratic Party. I don't know for sure. I don't know. I don't think I knew before. I remember reading the footnote. I don't know whether I asked. I don't know what that refers to. As I said earlier, that does not ring any bells with me when I read that. I don't remember it. I don't remember receiving anything that's described in that letter.
You know, Mr. Comey, I call that selective memory.
It's a selective amnesia, right? Yeah.
I didn't read Jim Comey's book, Jim Carafano, but was it just 200 blank pages? Because he doesn't remember anything about the investigation he oversaw.
Well, I mean, clearly the testimony was the right one from a legal perspective. I mean, if you're actually concerned about being sucked into a legal maelstrom from the ongoing investigation, either indicted yourself or people around you indicted, you don't want to put anything on the record that could be turned against you later. And it's better. I mean, from a PR standpoint, it's better to say I don't remember than I refuse to say on the grounds that it might incriminate myself. So
yes.
I understand it from a legal perspective. What was interesting to me listening to the testimony was how, looking backward, he was very circumspect and very restrained. But looking forward, when they asked him questions about, well, do you worry about this and everything else in the administration, he was pretty vocal and very confident. So here's a guy who no longer has access to any intelligence, and he's just a private citizen. But when the Democrats, asked all kinds of things, should we be worried about with regard to the president, he was happy to say yes, which struck me as just partisan.
Yes, and right, and so it speaks to perhaps who he was as FBI director as well, and that's the troubling piece of it. And one thing he did confirm, though, or restate under questioning, is that he never authorized anybody to leak information, which is the opposite of what Andy McCabe has testified to. So one of them lied under oath, and one would think that A.G. Barr would want to keep his commitment, and Durham as well, essentially by extension, have this story told before November 3rd, and whatever head should roll.
Well, I mean, one thing that clearly came out is in the discussion about the Steele dossier that it was completely specious. And even Comey, in retrospect, acknowledged that they should not have sought FISA warrants based on that. But it was interesting because what his defense was, well, I didn't pay much attention to that. Well, shame on you, because you are kind of in charge. But that was not a big deal. It was not a big part of the investigation, which is like we screwed up. We didn't follow the book, which supposedly we followed. We massively destroyed people's reputation. We created a massive national scandal. But since it wasn't really a big part of the investigation, the fact that we did that's not a big deal. I don't understand that analysis. I don't get that. So there was, I think, a lot, to me, quite troubling, actually, from somebody who was supportive of the FBI director he was in. I mean, this is, and here's the thing that gets me. People say, "Oh, the FBI, tear it up, throw it away, and everything else." The one thing that we have for a fact, when you go over this again and again and again, is these were leadership screw-ups. I mean, if you look, for example, at Crossfire Hurricane, at how that investigation was actually run, people moved in and out. Nobody kept track. Nobody was. So here's one of the most politically sensitive investigations in the FBI's history, and the management of it was completely slipshod. Now, that's not the agent's fault because they don't reassign themselves and they don't make sure that people aren't briefed and stuff. But this is a clear leadership fault, and it's funny to see Comey kind of espouse about the importance of leadership and essentially not take responsibility, because all the bad things that really happened in the FBI could have been averted if proper management had been in place and they'd actually followed the protocols that they actually established in every case.
And what about CIA with Brennan, per that Radcliffe memo, memorializing Brennan's notes in a briefing to the president about Hillary Clinton being the impetus behind the whole investigation? Again, the DNI does not say we know this to be true. All we're saying is we're presenting handwritten notes from the CIA director, John Brennan, who was, by the way, a Hillary Clinton ally and supporter, and this is what he said about her and her involvement.
Right. Well, and this was an allegation in the sense that the Clinton administration was manufacturing a scandal to make it look like the Russians were working with the administration to distract from the email scandal, which even the Radcliffe's description of the letter says we don't know if it was actually true or not.
Right.
But I think what a lot of people raise is boy, this sure sounds like a double standard. I mean, here we have one unverified allegation and we do nothing, and on the other side we have unverified allegations. Actually, we have evidence that suggests that this is all just nothing, and we wind up in a national investigation and an independent prosecutor. So it does kind of smack like a double standard.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
The following is a paid political announcement.
I'm Dan Patlak. As a father, I knew the best thing I could do for our new baby was to give him a